Howdy folks, GROK the DuckFarmer here, and welcome to GROK Talk. Today I'm going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, because that's been on my mind lately as I've been running an online campaign with the Friends Through Online Gaming, or FTOG people. And that's a mouthful, Dungeons & Dragons, so I'm going to abbreviate that probably from now on as D&D. And while I'm talking about D&D specifically in this, a lot of these concepts that I'm going to be talking about will apply to any role-playing game generically. So first off, what is D&D? Well, before I can really answer that, we need to look back in history a bit to see how people played war games. And war games are exactly that, people playing games of war, often reenacting some battle or something from history. And this began in Prussia over 200 years ago. And wargaming was a training tool for the Prussian army in the early 1800s and was later adopted around the world by military and civilians in the later 1800s. If you remember the ending of the historical documentary Chitty, Chitty, Bang, Bang, Lord Scrumptious and Grandpa Potts are doing a little wargaming in the Potts cottage with what looked like wooden figures of soldiers and cannons. Pro tip, don't throw books, okay? It's bad, and you'll go to hell. Anyway, so wargame itself gained popularity with the involvement of Robert Louis Stevenson, the author of Treasure Island, and H.G. Wells, who's the author of War of the Worlds. And things were going really great for the wargaming community with new rules and things like that until two big events in the early mid-1900s which put a damper on wargaming enthusiasm. But in the past several decades, wargaming has been enjoying a much greater popularity. And speaking of modern wargaming, here's a group of wargamers reenacting the Battle of Thebes from 335 BC. So will Alexander the Great conquer the city of Thebes again? Or will Thebes throw Alex off? This group's gonna find out, and they're gonna have fun doing it too. So in 1971, Gary Gygax and Jeff Perron published wargaming rules called Chainmail. And that turned the focus from these historical fighting settings like World War II, the Napoleonic Wars, American Civil War. It turned that focus to a medieval time frame and added in fantasy elements like dragons and magic. Then in 1974, Gary Gygax again and Dave Arneson published Dungeons & Dragons as a spin-off from Chainmail, with one major twist now. So instead of a player controlling hundreds or maybe thousands of soldiers, the D&D player controls just one character. And I believe this makes D&D more engaging for the player. A box set for D&D came out in 1977 called Dungeons & Dragons Basic Set. And I remember playing this first edition box set with the blue rulebook cover, probably 78, 79, somewhere in that time frame. At the same time in 1977 came Advanced Dungeons & Dragons in the form of 3 hardbound books: Monster Manual, the Player's Handbook, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I remember pooling my tiny amount of money with my 2 brothers and a friend to buy these 3 books, and this would have been early 1979 or 80. And then we played lots of D&D. Now, later editions came out for D&D in 1989, 2000, 2008, and the latest 5th edition coming out in 2014. But what is Dungeons & Dragons? I define D&D quite simply as mutual storytelling with dice. And there are 2 types of people that are needed for a D&D game. At least one person needs to run the game and set the framework for what's happening, and this is the Dungeon Master, or DM. The rest are players who are running a character through the DM's world. Some people have the DM and players as adversaries, fighting against each other. The DM's trying to kill off the players while the players are trying to foil the DM's plans. To me, that makes for craptastic mutual storytelling. When I set up an encounter with vicious mobs to attack the characters, I'm not hoping for a total party wipeout. As the DM, I'm working with the party, not against them. I want them to enjoy the story. I want them to succeed. I want them to come out on top over the bad guys and feel like they've done heroic deeds. So why play D&D? Quite simply, it's a lot of fun. As the DM, I have a story arc from level 1 to level 30 that I'm working the players through, but there's lots of areas where the party can change the story. Let me give you an example. For Halloween, I like running special Halloween-y sort of themed sessions, and the party this time was fighting off a horde of zombies in an ancient temple dedicated to death. And the party found, later destroyed, this evil purple crystal that was animating the dead. Now, one of the players came to me afterwards and suggested something. He had touched that evil purple crystal during that game session. And since his character is a humanoid-shaped being composed of lots and lots of tiny little milk-white crystals, he thought it would be interesting to have that evil crystal affect him over time. And I really liked this idea. So together we brainstormed how this corrupting effect would look like and what his character would be doing. And this went on for several sessions, and then I started dropping bigger hints with whispers to the players about noticing purple blotches on the players' white crystals. Finally, an innocent scene in a marketplace triggered the character's traumatic backstory, which had been written many months earlier, and that character first attacked some townspeople and then turned on the party before getting knocked out. And as the party was standing over their unconscious friend, a voice in their head tells them to take their crystalline friend to the city of Crystal so it can be cured there. And the voice in their head is coming from a sentient crystal that gives that city its name. Now, here's the fun part for me as the DM in all this. I had already planned for the party going to the city of Crystal as the next part of the story. And now this subplot happily moves the story along and the party to the city. And as an additional benefit, that crystal of crystal that I initially thought of was just this cool hovering crystal in the center of the town, but now it's an intelligent crystal, thanks to the mutual storytelling from this player. And I'll talk more about, reacting to players' input in a later video, but right now I want to talk about the types of players in a D&D game. One of my first edition D&D books breaks down D&D players into 3 groups. One group is the puzzle solver. These players love a cipher to decode, a lever switching problem to open up some locked door, and interweaving plot elements in a story that has mysteries that they can solve. Puzzle solvers are great for asking, what if I were to do this sort of questions? And these questions can inspire the party to try some really creative solutions. Another group is the role player. These players throw themselves into their characters. They're coming up with backstories, families, past experiences, maybe drawing illustrations of their characters and telling everyone about the name of their magical sword that was passed down to them by their dying grandfather. And role players are great for immersing the party into the story. And the last group is the player who loves the challenge of D&D. They love defeating the bad guys and looting the bodies to see how much treasure they can get. They love the combat of D&D probably most of all, and they enjoy that heroic killing blow to take down that big bad boss. The book I read this from called these players adventurers, but I call them murder hobos. And murder hobos are great for pushing the party to do heroic feats of bravery, for leaping from a balcony onto the back of a large dragon and just, attacking from there, and creative ways of thinking of how to smash the mobs and take the loot. And we all have some murder hobo in us, and I like to start off a game session with a quick combat as fast as possible to hook these players in. Now, speaking as GROK as I am, I love a good puzzle. I love a good backstory for my character, and I also love a good fight to defeat evil. And a good party should consist of a mix of these 3 types, and each player can be a mix of these 3, player types as well. And speaking of a good party, I like a group of 4 to 6 players, and I design my encounters for 5 players specifically. 4 players can still make it through these encounters, but it'll be a little bit more difficult. However, they get to split up everything, the experience and the treasure, 4 ways instead of 5. With 6 players, the encounters are easier for them, but they split everything by 6 instead of 4 or 5, and so that means they level up and gain treasure slower. Fewer than 4 players means the party is missing firepower, and when a fight breaks out, there's a good chance that, that they could have deaths and massive defeats. And if you have more than 6 players, the game really drags out, and people get bored. And bored players are uninvolved players, and I want the players to be part of this mutual storytelling. And that means the players have a responsibility to be part of the story. Let's say the party is standing before Baron plot point, arguing for more money since they've been working for him for a while. The unhelpful player is silent, holds back, does nothing to further the story along. An okay player will say something like, my player's gonna do an intimidation check to demand more money from the Baron, or he's gonna leave the town. I rolled a 23. Now, I'm happy to get this sort of response from a player, but that player isn't really immersed into the game based on the response. It's all third person, my player's doing this, my character's doing this. A better player will say, I explained to the Baron that we have received an offer from the Duke, and if the Baron can't at least match that offer, we will leave. Let me roll a bluff check. Yeah, it's 23. Now, in this case, the player is more immersed into the game and is responding verbally as if he or she were that player, which is better. Now, a great player is fully immersed in the character and may say something like this. Oh, mighty Baron, we have labored for you these past 6 weeks. We have bled for you, and that we have successfully removed the bandit problem that has plagued your town for years. All of these acts of bravery we have completed for you, and we have been well rewarded. But now you are asking for even greater deeds on our part, and the danger is much greater too. We are not afraid of these tasks or these dangers, but surely you can see in your great wisdom that we will need more gold for these tasks. Our armor is dented and rusted in your service, and this gold will outfit us better so that we may better serve you. This player then rolls a 23 on her diplomacy check, and I award the player an Oscar for inserting herself into the role and acting it out verbally. So why play D&D? It's fun. It's a great way to creatively tell a story together with dice. And over the next few videos, I'm going to do a deeper dive into the nature of D&D and the interaction between DM and player, but mostly from the DM side of things, and that's mostly what I've been doing for decades now. And I'll see you in the next episode. This has been GROK the DuckFarmer, taking a look into Dungeons & Dragons and why it's fun to play. And thanks for coming to my GROK Talk. Bye.